interviews and tackling big topics,
Germaine Greer.
you end up upsetting some people.
Well, what am I going to do if I don't do that?
Yeah, well, do you care about causing offence? Or
I get offended every day. Who's going to fix that up? I mean, every time Mrs. Brown's Boys comes on television, I'm vomiting with rage. But who's going to give me a break?
But do you think it's a good thing to try not to offend people?
No.
Or no?
No.
You should just always say whatever you think and hang the consequences.
Tell the truth.
Okay, so she says the transgender are not really women. She says she tells the truth. Well, that's her opinion. She's entitled, though. Is she entitled to say her opinion, or is she not? Now, as I said before, I think there's a problem with the LGBT because there's no connection between L, G, B, and T. How are they a community? What is the connection between people who have a sexual preference to their own gender and between people who undergo operations or identify as another gender? Or that's what I don't get. There's no connection whatsoever. And as I said before, you should add the letters W, weird, and N, nonconformist. And if you're really a nonconformist, you would be open for discussing ideas and not shut people up and ban them and demonstrate against them as if they're fascists.
It happens in rape is you're not allowed to get over it because they keep saying, if you say, I'm okay, I'm not crushed, I'm okay, they'll say you're in denial. You've been traumatized and you're now denying it. You're not going, and this will change you for the rest of your life. Everything that happens to you changes you for the rest of your life. How can it be more dreadful than being conscripted into an army, say, and made to kill people you've never met? I mean, how can we turn this into this vast drama when there are so many worse things that are going on in the world?
I mean,
well, she says that rape is not the worst thing that can happen to you. I think there are rape-like things. For instance, I do agree that if you're forced to go to the army and to do things that you don't want to do, that's sort of rape too. But I do think that rape is a traumatizing experience because it is a question of somebody overstepping your boundaries in a very brutal way. For both men and women, I think men that have been raped probably have the same experience.
You say it's really important to tell the truth. The people who are most offended with you at the moment seem to be the trans community. And this is something you get asked about a lot.
How are they even a community? That's what I wonder. How can you make a community? Is there like a woman community? Is there... the fact that gay people are a community is for me very odd. Because a community for me should be people that have the same values. And for me, just having a certain sexual preference doesn't make you have the same political opinions, the same values. It seems very odd to me. When you say a Jewish community or Christian community, Buddhist community, you assume there are shared values. When you talk about sexual identity, there's so many different opinions. You can be gay and you can be conservative or liberal or whatever. So for me, that's sort of limiting people and putting them in a box.
No, as far as I can tell, you don't really write about it or talk about it voluntarily. And so it makes me wonder why you enter into this debate. Is it just because somebody asks you a question, so you answer it?
Which debate?
About whether trans women are women, what is a woman, all of that definitional argument that you've been drawn into recently that has got you into a lot of trouble with a lot of people. And they're all offended with you.
Well, no, they pretend to be making
trouble. They are offended. I mean, you can see them.
Honestly, I keep being told that I'm going to be not platformed, right? The general public out there thinks I've been prevented from speaking on this subject. I don't speak on this subject. They speak on nothing else, so leave it to them. We're not even allowed to refer to the fact that somebody is transgender. We've got to call these people women, and we've got to behave as if we cannot see that they are not as we are, when it's blindingly obvious.
I also think that. I think it's kind of fascist, the way we are supposed to hold a certain opinion. I think people should be allowed to have certain opinion as long as they don't preach for harming other people. She never said, let's harm the transgenders, let's kill them, let's beat them up, let's not give them equal opportunities. I don't think she spoke against the the equality. She just talks about the definition. So there's a huge difference between preaching for violence against a certain person, or even the way the church speaks against, or other religions speak against gay people and making them invalid. She doesn't say they don't have a right to exist. She just says that they're not what they proclaim they are. She doesn't say you're not allowed to be a transgender. She just doubts whether they are another gender. That's all. And that's perfectly acceptable because they are not born as women. Didn't go through the whole process. They didn't go through the whole process of the way society treats women. Uh, they came into this world as boys, and I think the very formative years of a child, the very early years, they spend it as being a certain gender. So obviously that will affect them. When somebody is born a male and then they choose to be a female for whatever reason, whether they feel like a female or whatever, it's completely different than being a female and not having much choice about it. I don't think you do have a choice, actually. And I think the people that say we're going to be another gender, I don't think that's possible, actually. I think it's a deception. And I think people like it, there's a difference for good and bad. Like people like, what's her name? Caitlyn Jenner. Like he had kids, he got married, he acted like a male. And then at one point decided to be a woman, and not just any woman, a fancy schmancy woman with fancy clothes and makeup and facelifts. And is that a woman? Cosmetics and makeup, is that being a woman? I say no. I say that being a woman is a biological definition, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have children, but it does mean that you have a certain biological process that you undergo, whether it's having periods or even if you don't have periods, where I'm looking at all the exceptions to the rule. It's about being born in a certain gender and having been socialized into this gender, and this waking up at 40 or 50 and saying, hey, I'm really a woman, sorry, cutting off body parts or just putting on a lot of makeup and dressing does not make you a woman. No, it doesn't. Being a woman is very tough in this society. And I think these privileged males that have a lot of money and then they invest in, all these surgeries and removal of their facial hair, it's all very expensive. It's about money. It's about wealthy people being able to change. It's also a social status issue, etc. Because you could be transgender and not undergo surgeries. You can just say, hey, I identify as female, dress as female, and not undergo surgeries and not take hormones. Taking hormones is extremely harmful. So why is she not allowed to say that? Why are people allowed to preach to be transgender to people from a very early age, and it gets younger and younger? It goes to 5. I don't know, it's going to be a baby soon. And you just start very early transition. And children don't even know how to make a choice of what they want to be when they grow up, and then yet they make an irreversible decision to change their gender, and they make it sound like it's a hero's journey, and you cannot even say anything against it, which I think is fascist. I think there should be open debate, but whether it is possible to change gender and what do people really wish to achieve through that. And I think she should be allowed to talk.
That's all an infringement of our right of free speech, but we don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's like she's not saying you should beat them up or they should not have human rights, and she's not talking like the church that we should do something against them. She just says that she doesn't think they're women, and she has a right to say that. She spent her life researching about how society molds women into certain roles because they're born as girls and women, and how society enslaves women into these roles, gender roles. So she has a right to speak out against people that she doesn't believe are women in the first place. It doesn't mean that she wants them to be harmed in any way.
A big fuss about that. What actually happens is they keep saying that I'm not allowed to speak on any subject whatsoever. Because they're men, and they think, well, they were men, and they think that they're important. It's what about me? It's a great male question. We could embroider it on all your t-shirts. What about me? We have problems of definition about what is a woman, maybe, but we have many more problems connected to the fact that we are women, because people can't make sense of our anatomy or our health or what menstruation is.
So she's trying to say, let's focus about what it means like to be a woman that's biologically born a woman. It's complicated enough as it is, without taking people that were born male and deciding, hey, we're women, just like, oh, let's just undergo an operation, as complicated as it is, and then we're women. I don't think it's as simple as that. And I don't think they're represented, because the whole idea of feminism or speaking up for women's right is that you're forced to play a role just because you were born biologically a certain gender. And I think that is extremely unfair. And it's just like people are forcing stereotypes on people because they were born dark-skinned or Asian or Jewish or Catholic or any other thing they were born into, whether it's a religion or ethnic group identity that they were born into, and then we force them a stereotype on them. And, sometimes I think those stereotypes, you find people acting according to their stereotypes, which is even more shocking. And she's speaking against that. I find that there are a lot of people that really act according to the stereotypes, whether it's ethnic origin or women or whatever. And this transgenders, they behave like a stereotype. It's absolutely absurd how they stereotypically they behave like. They're more women than women. They are dressing in a feminine way, and you'll never catch Caitlyn Jenner with pants or without makeup on. Why is that? If she's a woman, why doesn't she ever go out of the house without lipstick and full makeup and hairdo and et cetera, et cetera? That's my question. Why do they have to have breast implants? If you feel like a woman, and if you feel like your mind, the way you feel dictates your gender, then why do you need all this dresses and surgeries and hormones? That's the big question. And I think it's time to open up this discussion, because it really is taking away from the question of women in society and how women are being forced to live in a certain role. And transgenders often copy the stereotypical role of women. They act like stereotypical women. The way they dress, the way they act is very stereotypical women. They act like Minnie Mouses. They're always with makeup and always very dressed up and full makeup. And is that really a woman? Do you really need to put on lipstick to be a woman? That's the question.
Or why some women are crippled by menstruation and can't go to work. We can't make sense
how much
of
do you
why
care
our
about
babies
this issue?
die in utero.
Is what I'm not sure. Because there are lots of feminists who find the whole question of trans women very annoying, and they feel it's an assault on them, and they feel it's a misogynist kind of
I'm afraid
construct. Are you amongst them?
No, I'm more insulting, I'm afraid. I think it's uninteresting. I think we have much bigger problems.
Exactly.
And our problems are connected with things like that we cannot tell a woman, why her baby died in utero at 7 months. Why can't we tell that? Because we've never worked on it. Why have we never worked on it? Because of misogyny, because of lack of interest, because being interested in women's affairs is to become the most contempt of doctors, a gynecologist. So they can't answer the simplest questions. What is postpartum psychosis? How do we take care of women who are threatening to kill their babies? And the young woman who died as they ferried her between 3 hospitals, a young, well-connected woman who died because they tried to restrain her. She ruptured her liver. At that stage, they decided that she needed to go to a mental hospital, and she ended up dead. That is absolutely outrageous, and it should never happen in our community, or indeed in any community.
Don't you feel that you'd be able to spend more time on all of those questions if you just moved on from this trans question and said, okay, fine, if you want to join us as women, then you're women. Come and join us in the bigger struggles.
Well, they're not going to help us much with postpartum psychosis, are they?
Yeah, that's the thing, is because they're not biologically women and they have hormones coming in. It's different than women that have different cycles and their hormone levels fluctuate, and they just, women's biology is just complex, much more complex than women that are artificially made. It's like comparing a robot to a human being. People that have become a certain gender and are relying on hormones, they have their hormones monitored. What woman has her hormone level monitored? Not a lot, I would say. And there are a lot of things we need to learn more about being a woman. And we can also talk about menopause. During this process of menopause, women in the US, at least, I know, have been told to take hormones replacement, as if you need to take hormones in order to maintain um, a certain functioning that you had before menopause, instead of respecting menopause as a part of a natural process. So hormones, when you define women as having a certain amount of hormones, that's very disrespectful, and that's also it's ridiculous how these women insist on being women when they just don't face the same challenges as being a real woman is. A woman that has a cycle, a woman that has sometimes not a cycle, a woman that has different phases in her life, because she's born as a woman, because she's born as a girl, undergoes certain social conflicts that people that were not born girl just don't have that experience from an early age. Even as early as you can as early as you can transition, you still haven't gone through the conflict of what it's like to be treated as a little girl from baby to 3. You haven't been those ages as a female, and you cannot therefore understand the struggle, what it means to be a woman. You can say, I have a strong female side to me, but you cannot say that you're the same as someone who's born into the gender, who never had a choice.
Or even with menstrual discomfort. Or I think we can manage. We are 51% of the population, and we're being held to ransom by a handful of people who are extremely vocal and aggressive.
That's true.
And that's no surprise to any of us. I don't understand why we have to make a mockery of older women. And that's universal. You say to me, I'm offending people. Every time you get vilified because you're an old woman, and you only have to be 50, not very old. I'm now 80. I'm as old as you like. And you can call me senile and anything else you want to call me. But I'm not going to be hijacked for this question of sexual identity, of gender identity. Look, I wrote a book a long time ago about how you get made into a woman. In those days, we called it conditioning. And you could see it happens from birth. Little baby girls are left to cry for longer than baby boys. They are fed for shorter periods than baby boys. We want them to be smaller than baby boys, and so on and so on and so on.
And not to mention certain societies like Japanese society, Japanese as well, but Chinese, when they force the little girls to wear shoes so their feet don't grow, and other societies where baby girls were actually killed. I think it's in India and other societies. There's so many different cultures where baby girls are treated so differently than baby boys. So for somebody who was raised as a boy and then decided to be female, it's a completely different experience, and they have to respect that. And I think saying transgender woman, a person who takes hormones and did an operation, is exactly the same as being born a woman, is disrespectful to all the difficulties and trials of being a girl, a female in the world today, in any given society. Some societies more than others, but it is disrespectful to the struggle of being a female in this world.
Through our entire lifespan, where we're learning femininity, and it's a masquerade. It's not who we really are. There is nothing feminine about being pregnant. It's almost the antithesis of that. There's nothing feminine about giving birth. It's a bloody struggle, and you've got to be strong and brave. There's nothing feminine about breastfeeding. God knows it drives everybody mad. They want to see nice, big, pumped up tits, but they don't want to see them doing their job. And it just goes on and on. That masquerade is what is now being presented to us back
Exactly.
as the real deal.
Exactly. They take like a blown up doll and they say, this is a woman. All I need to do is put breast implants and take hormones and I'm a woman. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. And there's psychological factors and social factors, and it's disrespectful to women. You don't realize the profound experience of being a woman in society, and you don't respect it. So the transgenders are the ones not respecting. They're not the ones that are being offended. They are the offending one. That's how I see it as well.
The hair extensions and the false eyelashes.
Exactly.
And you think, why do you think that's real when we all know that it isn't?
So
now, gender, let me explain here. Sex is a given, and you can be intersex. One of the women in Gender Quake is genuinely intersex. She has breasts and a penis, and she's fantastic. And she doesn't want to cut her body about. God knows it's a problem body. She has a problem when she meets someone, whether she thinks they might be able to develop a relationship. When does she say, by the way, I've got a penis? She's accepted female gender. That is all fine. That's not a problem for me. And intersex is relatively common, especially in certain ethnic groups, and they have ways of dealing with it. It's a completely different thing when you decide to eliminate masculinity at one end and adopt hyper-femininity at the other.
Exactly.
You've left all this space in here where the rest of us live. I'm not a particularly feminine person, but some aspects of my character, men would tell you, are extremely feminine. I don't even think about it.
So just so we can make sense of this conversation, just briefly, can you just explain to me what you mean by femininity and masculinity and how it differs from sex?
Let's see. Femininity is learning to speak more softly. It's why little girls want to wear a pink tutu to the shops. It's why they want their bedroom painted pink, because or be a princess. I have my godchildren spent 5 years wanting to be princesses. I had to preach many a sermon about how unhappy princesses are. They're all learning that stuff, and they impose it on each other.
And does femininity go with being a woman?
No, but that's a gender.
That's the question.
But hang on, that's a gender thing. Now, gender can be anything you like. It's entirely cultural. But unfortunately, sex is not entirely cultural. It's something you're born with, whether you like it or not. And most of us who grow up to be women, who have our first period, 12, 13, 14, whatever, traumatizing otherwise, a body we thought we knew becomes smelly and dirty and different. And then the boys come along to be watching pornography and say that we're not groomed, we have to remove our body hair and so on. We'll get to spend our lives removing body hair. That's femininity, which is the fake version of femaleness.
Exactly.
Female is real and it's sex, and femininity is unreal and it's gender. And it's a role you play.
Exactly.
And for that to become the given identity of women is a profoundly disabling notion.
But in the 48 years since you wrote Female Eunuch, when you
all
first took these notions apart of the difference between femininity and being female, do you feel that women have, sort of rather disappointingly conformed to femininity? Or have they followed your lead?
I would be very disappointed if they followed my lead. That would make me tear my hair. I'm not a cultist. I'm not a charismatic preacher.
But there hasn't been any real divorce of femininity and being female, has there, in that period? That's what I'm asking.
But there has been for some people. There was in China. In China, during the Great Leap Forward, men and women were indistinguishable. They looked exactly the same. Now, that's made very easy because they're the same height. Now, in our race, our mixture of races, speaking of basically Aryan, men are bigger than women. Characteristically, women are shorter. So it's hard for us to pretend to be men. And it's been one of the things that breaks my heart when I see female to male transsexuals, that they have tiny hands and tiny feet. And I think just as male to female transsexuals have enormous hands and enormous feet. And I think
Not
Here
always.
you are, you've taken male hormones, you've grown a little beard, your hair is cut, and you're wearing men's clothes, and here are these tiny hands and feet that are giving the game away. We don't have the drugs to give you that can make you sprout big hands. It's in some ways a delusion. It's a delusion that you can do it. I mean, if you think about it, why would you think I'm in the wrong body? If I cut bits of it, it'll turn into the right one.
Yeah, exactly what I think.
There's no logic there.
Exactly.
It can't work. If I have a pen on the chopping board and I take off its leg, it doesn't turn into a cock. I mean, you can't do it. I'm really interested in the young people who didn't feature in Genderquake the other day, the young people who decided they don't want to be any sex, who have their secondary sexual characteristics suppressed. They remove breasts, they remove penises and testicles, and they want to be like angels, sexless. And I've actually written about it long ago, around about the time of the female eunuch. I wrote a story about what would it be like if when you met people you didn't know what sex they were, and you would get to know them and fall in love with them, and you still wouldn't know what was likely to happen when you became into it. You would have to discover it. And I thought that would be amazing.
So what do you think is going on there? I mean, why do you think we're seeing more of this public?
Well, I think there are lots of reasons. One is that we have to have fewer children. So we might begin to not practice reproductive sex as much. We would actually do more polymorphous.
Do you think this is sort of an evolutionary step?
Well, you better hope that it is, because we really have to have fewer children. The earth can't support us anymore. And we've already got same-sex marriage. Interesting. I don't know. I think same-sex, yes, marriage not. Marriage has bad history, and I'm not a champion of marriage.
Me either. I think it's ridiculous, but people that have same-sex marriage also do it for security reasons, because when you're married, you have certain benefits. If one of the partners happens to die, inheritance, etc., and a lot of times you're raising children together. So marriage is sort of another name for a partnership. You can call it a partnership rather than marriage, but I understand what you're saying.
People owning each other, I'm profoundly against that. But if what's happening is we're learning different ways of pleasuring each other that don't involve the exposure of an ovum to sperm, and it's arguable that's already happening, but you would hope it became not an imitation of slam, bam, thank you, ma'am, that it actually became more intelligent.
Let's move on a few decades actually to the change.
To the two, all right.
which is the book that you've rewritten, revised, and put out again, and it's about women aging and the menopause, as it says on the front. Why is this the book that you've revised?
Because a great deal has happened since it was first published. There are the two great cohort studies, the one in America and the one in England. And they were very badly designed. They got terribly mixed up over their terms of reference. They terrified a whole generation of women, and they got the wrong results because they'd set it up the wrong way. There are plenty of people, like Wolf Utian, for example, who is bitter about this, who says that because of what happened in that case, women have died of diseases that we knew how to prevent. And he's bitter about that. He makes a case. I'm not convinced by it. I wish it hadn't been badly designed. But what we really needed was a much stronger commitment to better studies looking for specific things that we're trying to understand. They tried to do it on the cheap, and this is the story of women, that you think you can do it that way, and they absolutely couldn't. So women, lots of women who might have got benefit from replacement steroids, dumped them and were too terrified to use them again. And that was a sad thing. But it was a direct consequence of the fact that the replacement steroids, HRT as we call it, have been oversold, ridiculously oversold. They were not the elixir of youth. They would deal with specific problems connected with. Now, what I can't say is estrogen deficiency, because we never proved it. but it's to do with the fluctuations in estrogen secretion in the body of a menopausal woman, who could be anything from 30 to 60. So that's another vagary that we can't fix. So I want to say, yes, replacement steroids have a role, but be skeptical and don't take them for any longer than you need to.
Are you going to revisit any of your other works and revise them?
No, I don't think so.
The Female Eunuch doesn't need rewriting.
No, it needs another book, somebody else's better book. No, it's very much a book of its time. That's not a very good book. I'm perfectly happy to see somebody else write a better one. It's a bit disappointing that it's some reading list for kids at school.
Still.
I could go
Because
and
so
teach
much
them
has
what's
changed.
wrong with it. I don't believe all that.
What is wrong with it?
Oh, it's too literary. Because that was my milieu. I didn't have much acquaintance with the real world. I was a bookish person. And now I think the academic character of so much feminism, the fact that it went into university courses rather than into industry and politics, it's become ridiculous.
Just in the last few minutes, can I just ask you a few little sort of advice questions then?
Advice?
Yeah,
I don't give
advice questions. For people bringing up children, how should they raise their sons and daughters to think of femininity and masculinity?
That's a good question.
A lot of parents, I've got young children, a lot of parents will say, God, it's amazing, how they sort of, they fall into their gender roles, how the girls just want to play with dolls, how boys and girls want to play separately, how the boys want to play sports and the girls don't. I mean, is all of that nonsense? Have you got to try actively to try and break that as a parent?
I think you're on a prayer to nothing. It's not going to happen. I've been watching little girls because I'm fascinated by this pink business. And I think pink stinks. It's an awful chemical colour. I wish it was some other nice colour. And I realise that in many cases, it's a kind of guerrilla activity. They're forming a little bunch of stormtroopers in favour of pink. And they want their hair very long, dangling in their faces. I mean, the children who've grown up in my house all got their hair cut because it used to drive me mad that they had hair in their